The observation deck of the Harmony station hung suspended in Earth's orbit, its massive windows framing the blue-green planet against the star-speckled void of space. Thomas Reeves stood alone at the viewport, his tall frame tense as he straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. As Earth's senior negotiator, he carried the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. "Commander Reeves, they've arrived." Lieutenant Parker's voice broke through his reflection. "The Lumari delegation is docking now." Thomas nodded, his expression composed despite the flutter of nerves in his stomach. After decades of interstellar conflict with the Arcturian coalition, humanity had finally brokered peace. Now, an entirely new alien species had appeared at the edge of the solar system, requesting diplomatic contact. "Very well. Let's make history, shall we?" Thomas followed Parker through the gleaming corridors of the station, mentally reviewing the first contact protocols he'd memorized years ago but never expected to use. The delegation awaited him in the Grand Chamber, a circular room designed specifically for diplomatic functions. Representatives from Earth's United Planetary Government and several Arcturian officials stood in a semicircle, all eyes fixed on the entrance doors. A soft chime announced the arrival of the visitors. The doors slid open silently, and Thomas's breath caught in his throat. The aliens were humanoid but unmistakably foreign. Their skin pulsed with an inner bioluminescence, shifting between deep azure and violet. The delegation consisted of 5 beings, but Thomas's attention was immediately drawn to the one who stood at their center, clearly their leader. She moved with liquid grace, her tall, athletic form wrapped in a material that seemed to capture and reflect starlight. Her features were delicate yet strong, with high cheekbones and eyes that glowed like distant nebulae, pools of deep purple light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Thomas stepped forward, bowing slightly as protocol dictated. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I welcome you to Harmony Station. I am Commander Thomas Reeves, Chief Diplomatic Envoy of the United Planetary Government." The alien leader studied him with those mesmerizing eyes before inclining her head. When she spoke, her voice resonated with a melodic quality that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his mind. "I am Valora, High Envoy of the Lumari Collective. We have traveled across 17 star systems to meet with your kind." She gestured elegantly toward her companions. "We have observed your recent peace negotiations from afar and deemed this an appropriate time for first contact." Thomas maintained his diplomatic composure despite his racing heart. "We are honored by your interest in our civilization. May I ask what brings the Lumari to our corner of the galaxy?" Valora's skin pulsed with a pattern of light that Thomas couldn't interpret. "The stars are vast, Commander, but intelligent life is precious. The Lumari seek alliances with species who demonstrate potential for growth and harmony. Your recent peace accord caught our attention." The meeting proceeded with formal introductions and preliminary discussions about cultural exchange. Throughout the talks, Thomas couldn't help noticing how Valora's gaze continually returned to him, studying him with an intensity that went beyond diplomatic interest. As the initial meeting concluded, Thomas extended his hand in the traditional Earth greeting. "To the beginning of a prosperous relationship between our peoples." Valora regarded his outstretched hand with curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, she reached forward, her luminescent fingers meeting his. The instant their skin touched, a visible pulse of energy traveled from the point of contact up Valora's arm. Her eyes widened in surprise, the purple glow intensifying dramatically. Everyone in the chamber froze, uncertain of what was happening. "This is..." Valora whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. "Unexpected." Before Thomas could respond, she swayed slightly, her companions rushing to steady her. The patterns of light beneath her skin accelerated to a frantic tempo, creating waves of color that rippled across her body. "High Envoy, are you well?" one of her companions asked, concern evident in his tone. Valora stared at her hand, then back at Thomas. "A connection has been formed. Something unprecedented." Her voice carried through the chamber as she made an announcement that would change the course of human history. Commander Reeves, your energy signature has initiated a genesis within me. I am now carrying a child that is both Lumari and human. The chamber erupted into chaos. Thomas stood frozen, unable to comprehend her words. A child? From a mere touch? It was impossible. Yet as their eyes locked across the space between them, he felt a strange connection, a bond that transcended physical understanding. In one unexpected moment, Thomas Reeves had become more than Earth's diplomat. He had become the first human to father a child with an alien species, thrusting himself into the center of what would undoubtedly become the most significant interspecies incident in human history. The hours following Valoris' announcement passed in a blur of chaos. Thomas found himself whisked away to the station's medical bay, subjected to a barrage of tests while diplomatic channels between Earth and the Lumari delegation erupted with frantic communications. This is biologically impossible, Dr. Naomi Wright said, studying the readouts on her tablet. She was the station's chief xenobiologist, hastily called in to make sense of the situation. Human and alien DNA shouldn't be compatible, let alone from simple skin contact. Thomas sat on the examination table, his mind still reeling. And yet, here we are. Through the observation window, he could see Valora undergoing her own examination, surrounded by both human medical staff and her own companions. Her luminescent skin pulsed with a new rhythm now, concentrated around her midsection. Despite the clinical setting, she maintained a regal composure that Thomas couldn't help but admire. General Hammond, the station commander, entered the medical bay, his weathered face tight with concern. Commander Reeves, we have a situation developing. Earth's Security Council is demanding answers, and there are already protests forming in major cities. The news has leaked. Thomas exhaled slowly. That was inevitable. What's the official position? There isn't one yet. Half the council sees this as a diplomatic catastrophe, the other half as a historic opportunity. Hammond lowered his voice. And the Arcturians are questioning whether this was some kind of planned human strategy. Before Thomas could respond, the door to the adjoining examination room opened, and Valora entered. Her attendants hovered protectively at her sides, but she waved them back. Commander Reeves, she said, her melodic voice somehow calming the tension in the room. I believe we have much to discuss. General Hammond nodded stiffly. I'll arrange for a private conference room. Once alone in the sterile white conference room, Thomas found himself at a loss for words. Diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for becoming an interspecies father through accidental touch. Your scientists are confused, Valora stated, her galaxial eyes studying him. As are mine. This has never occurred in our recorded history. Thomas nodded. Humans reproduce quite differently. We require more significant physical contact. A ripple of blue light passed across Valora's skin in what Thomas was beginning to recognize as amusement. Yes, we have studied basic human biology. The Lumari exchange energy signatures during moments of deep connection. These signatures combine and manifest as new life. It typically occurs only between life-bonded pairs after deliberate ritual. But we only touched hands, Thomas said. Indeed. Valoris' expression became thoughtful. Our scientists believe your bioelectric field resonated with mine at a frequency that triggered genetic exchange. The child growing within me carries energetic patterns from both our species. Thomas ran a hand through his dark hair. How fast will it develop? Much faster than a human child. Perhaps 3 of your Earth months until birth. Valora hesitated, then continued with unexpected gentleness. Thomas Reeves, I understand this circumstance is unexpected. In my culture, all life is sacred, especially one so unique. However, I do not expect anything from you personally. Something in her words touched Thomas deeply. Despite the diplomatic chaos erupting around them, he felt a strange responsibility, not just to Earth or his position, but to Valora and the impossible child they had somehow created. "No," he said firmly. "I won't abandon my responsibility. Whatever happens, we face it together." A surge of vibrant purple light pulsed beneath Valora's skin, and for the first time, she smiled, an expression surprisingly similar to a human's, yet illuminated from within. Their moment of understanding was interrupted as the conference room door slid open. Vice Admiral Harlow entered, followed by Earth's highest-ranking officials available on the station and two stern-looking Lumari. "Commander Reeves, High Envoy Valora," Harlow said, her tone formal. "Both our governments require immediate statements regarding this incident." One of the Lumari stepped forward. "High Envoy, the Council of Light demands your return to our vessel. This unprecedented development must be evaluated by our genetic archivists." Thomas recognized the political maneuvering at play. Both species wanted to separate them, to control the narrative and potential consequences of their unique situation. Valora's light patterns darkened. "Elder Torno, I will not return at this time. As carrier of the first hybrid child, my place is here, establishing diplomatic protocols for this new reality." Admiral Harlow's expression hardened. "Commander Reeves, Earth Command suggests you recuse yourself from diplomatic duties until we determine the full implications of this situation." Thomas straightened, feeling a surge of protectiveness he couldn't explain. "With respect, Admiral, removing me would send precisely the wrong message. This accident has created an unprecedented opportunity for human-Lumari relations. I intend to fulfill my duty as Earth's representative, and as a responsible party in this matter." The tension in the room was palpable as human and Lumari officials exchanged glances, realizing that neither Thomas nor Valora would be easily controlled. Outside the viewport, Earth rotated serenely, unaware that its place in the galactic community had just been irrevocably altered by a simple touch between two species. As Thomas met Valora's glowing gaze across the conference table, he sensed that their connection, and the child it had created, would reshape the destiny of both their peoples, whether the universe was ready or not. 3 weeks after the touch that changed everything, Thomas stood in the newly established Lumari Human Cultural Exchange Center aboard Harmony Station. What had begun as a medical observation area had expanded into a joint scientific and diplomatic hub, with representatives from both species working side by side. "The embryonic development is progressing at 17 times the rate of normal human gestation," Dr. Wright explained, showing Thomas the latest scans. "The fetal structure shows elements of both species, but is developing its own unique characteristics." The holographic image rotating above the display table showed a small form that pulsed with gentle light, already exhibiting the luminescence of Valora's people while maintaining recognizably humanoid features. "And Valora?" Thomas asked, unable to mask the concern in his voice. "The High Envoy's health remains excellent. Her body has adapted remarkably to sustain the hybrid physiology." Over the past weeks, Thomas had found himself increasingly drawn to Valora. What began as a diplomatic crisis had evolved into something more complex. They spent hours together daily, ostensibly discussing cultural exchange and preparing for the implications of their child's birth, but their conversations often strayed to personal territories. Thomas found her perspective on the universe refreshing. The Lumari were an ancient species who viewed the cosmos as an interconnected web of energy and consciousness, yet they balanced this spiritual outlook with advanced scientific understanding that made Earth's technology seem primitive by comparison. He located Valora in the observatory, where she often went to meditate. Her pregnancy was now visibly evident, her abdomen gently rounded and glowing with a soft golden light that had appeared in the second week. "The doctors say everything is progressing well," Thomas said as he joined her at the viewport. Valora turned, her eyes brightening at his presence. "Our child is strong. I can feel its consciousness forming, a beautiful blend of Lumari perception and human determination." Thomas still marveled at how the Lumari could sense things beyond physical reality. Can you tell if it's a boy or girl? A ripple of blue light, amusement, crossed her skin. Your binary gender concepts don't quite apply. Lumari manifest aspects of both what you would call masculine and feminine energies, though individuals often express one more predominantly. Our child seems to be developing a balance similar to my own expression. Thomas smiled. So I should prepare for a daughter who glows in the dark and can probably read minds? Perhaps, Valora replied, her own lips curving upward. Though telepathy typically develops during adolescence. Their moment of levity was interrupted by Thomas's communication device. Admiral Harlow's stern voice came through. Commander Reeves, we have a situation. The public demonstrations on Earth have escalated. Religious groups are calling the child an abomination, while trans-species rights activists are demanding protective legislation. Thomas sighed. Despite their best efforts to manage information, humanity's reactions had been polarized. Many saw the child as a symbol of hope and unity, but others feared what it represented, a future where humanity might be fundamentally changed through contact with alien species. And there's more, Harlow continued. We've detected unusual movement among the Arcturian fleet. They're requesting an emergency session of the Interstellar Council. After ending the call, Thomas shared the news with Valora. Her light patterns dimmed with concern. The Arcturians fear change, she said. They accepted peace with humans because they saw you as a manageable species. Our child represents an evolution they did not anticipate. They're not the only ones struggling to adapt, Thomas admitted. Even on Earth, there are those who see this as a threat to human purity. Valora placed her hand gently on her glowing abdomen. Fear of the unknown is universal, it seems. Thomas hesitated, then carefully placed his hand next to hers. The gentle warmth and subtle vibration beneath her skin had become familiar to him now. I felt something, he whispered as a distinctive flutter pulsed against his palm. Valora's eyes brightened. The child recognizes you. Your energy signature is imprinted within its very essence. Something shifted in Thomas at that moment, a deepening of the connection he had been developing with both Valora and their unborn child. This was no longer just a diplomatic incident to manage, it was his family. Valora, he said, his voice low and serious. Whatever happens with Earth or the Arcturians or even your own people, I want you to know that I'm committed to you and our child. Not just as a diplomatic duty, but because he paused, surprised by the emotion welling up within him. Before he could continue, the station's alert system activated, bathing the observatory in pulsing red light. Emergency protocols engaged, announced the station's AI. All diplomatic personnel report to secure conference rooms immediately. Thomas's communication device chimed with priority clearance. Admiral Harlow's face appeared, her expression grave. Commander, we've received a transmission from an unknown vessel that just entered the system. They're demanding we surrender, and I quote, the abomination and its progenitors. We believe they're referring to your child. As security personnel rushed into the observatory to escort them to safety, Thomas instinctively moved closer to Valora, his hand still resting protectively over their unborn child. Who are they? He demanded. Valora's skin had darkened to a deep indigo, a sign of distress Thomas had never seen before. They call themselves the Purifiers, she whispered. Religious extremists who believe in maintaining the cosmic order through genetic purity. They've hunted my people before. As they hurried through the station corridors, Thomas realized that their child faced threats from more than just prejudice and politics. Someone out there was willing to kill to prevent its very existence. For the first time since becoming a diplomat, Thomas found himself wishing he had maintained his earlier career in Earth's special forces. The skills he had once used to protect humanity might now be needed to protect his newfound family, and possibly the future of interspecies harmony throughout the galaxy. The command center of Harmony Station hummed with tense activity as military personnel from both Earth and the Lumari coordinated their defense strategy. Thomas stood beside Admiral Harlow, studying the holographic display of the Purifier vessel hovering at the edge of Earth's orbital defense perimeter. "Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered," Harlow said grimly. "Initial scans suggest weapons capabilities that could breach our shields within minutes if they choose to attack." Thomas frowned. "Have they made any further communications?" "Just the same demand, repeated every 30 minutes. Surrender the genetic aberration and its parents, or they'll cleanse the contamination themselves." Thomas felt a chill run through him. He had faced danger many times in his career, but never with so much at stake personally. Valora had been moved to the station's secure core, surrounded by both human security forces and her own Lumari guardians. Elder Torno, who had initially opposed Valora's decision to remain on the station, now stood as one of their strongest allies. "The Purifiers are a scourge across multiple star systems," he explained. "They believe that interspecies breeding disrupts the cosmic hierarchy. They have destroyed entire colonies to prevent what they see as contamination." "Why didn't you warn us about them earlier?" Thomas demanded. "We believed they had been eradicated decades ago," Torno replied, his skin pulsing with regretful blue patterns. "Their appearance now suggests they have been hiding, gathering strength." A junior officer approached, saluting sharply. "Commander Reeves, High Envoy Valora is requesting your presence immediately. The medical team reports unusual developments." Thomas's heart raced as he made his way to the medical bay. Had the stress of the situation affected the pregnancy? When he arrived, he found Valora lying on an examination table, surrounded by medical equipment, her abdomen now glowing with intense golden light that pulsed in rhythmic waves. "Thomas," she said, reaching for his hand. "Our child senses the danger. It's accelerating its development." Dr. Wright looked up from her instruments, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "The fetus has undergone the equivalent of 2 weeks of development in the past hour. At this rate, we could be looking at birth within days rather than months." "Is that dangerous?" Thomas asked, squeezing Valora's hand gently. "We don't know," Wright admitted. "This is unprecedented territory. The child appears to be adapting its physiology in response to the external threat, but the strain on High Envoy Valora's system is significant." Valora's eyes met Thomas's. "Our child is trying to protect us, Thomas. It senses that its existence places us in danger and is attempting to reach a state where it can help." "Help? It's not even born yet. Lumari children are born with certain abilities," she explained. "Particularly those related to energy manipulation. Our child is developing unique capabilities, perhaps due to its hybrid nature." As if in response to her words, the golden light surrounding Valora's abdomen pulsed brightly, and all the electronic equipment in the room momentarily flickered. "Incredible," Dr. Wright whispered, checking her readings. "The fetus just generated an electromagnetic pulse, but somehow directed it only at our technology without affecting Lumari systems." Thomas looked at Valora in amazement. "Our baby did that?" Before she could respond, the station's alarm blared. Admiral Harlow's voice came over the comm system, "All personnel to battle stations. The Purifier vessel has launched smaller craft. They appear to be boarding parties heading for the station." Thomas straightened, years of military training taking over. "How many?" 3 ships, approximately 30 combatants total. "Their target will be the medical bay," Thomas said, already moving toward the weapons locker in the corner of the room. "They're coming for Valora and our child." The medical staff began emergency evacuation procedures as security teams took position in the corridors outside. Thomas checked the charge on a standard-issue pulse rifle, memories of his combat days flooding back. "Thomas," Valora called, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "There is another option." The Lumari mothership could create a slipstream portal large enough for the entire station to travel through. We could escape to our home system where the purifiers would not dare follow. Thomas shook his head. And abandon Earth? Make humanity look weak in our first major interstellar crisis? That would set back human standing in the galactic community for generations. Then we fight, she said, her skin shimmering with resolved determination as she struggled to sit up. You need to conserve your strength, Thomas insisted, gently pressing her back down. Valora fixed him with her luminous gaze. I may be carrying a child, but I am still High Envoy of the Lumari Collective. My people were navigating the stars when humans were still discovering fire. Before Thomas could respond, the first explosion rocked the station. The battle had begun. The next hour passed in a blur of combat. The purifiers, dressed in sleek armor that seemed to absorb energy weapons, pushed relentlessly toward the medical bay. Thomas fought alongside Earth security forces and Lumari guards, using tactics from his special forces days to outmaneuver the technologically superior invaders. When the final push came, Thomas found himself cornered in the medical bay with only 2 security officers and Elder Torno for protection. Dr. Wright had managed to evacuate Valora through a maintenance shaft, but the purifiers had tracked them somehow. We can't hold them much longer, one of the security officers shouted as another explosion rocked the doorway. Thomas knew a tactical retreat was their only option. Fall back to secondary position, he ordered. We need to buy them more time. As they moved deeper into the station, following the route Valora had taken, Thomas's comm device activated. Admiral Harlow's voice came through, tight with urgency. Commander, the Arcturian fleet has just arrived. They're engaging the purifier vessel. Thomas felt a surge of hope. The Arcturians are helping us? It appears so. Their commander says they're defending the treaty and, this is a direct quote, the right of all sentient species to determine their own evolutionary path. With renewed determination, Thomas pressed forward, eventually finding Valora in a small auxiliary control room, surrounded by Lumari guards and medical staff. Her condition had changed dramatically, the golden glow now enveloped her entire body, and she seemed to hover slightly above the floor. Thomas, she said, her voice resonating with new power. Our child has connected with the Lumari collective consciousness. It's channeling energy from our home world. As he watched in amazement, the light surrounding Valora expanded outward, forming a translucent sphere that encompassed the entire room. Outside, they could hear the purifiers breaking through the final barriers. What's happening? Thomas asked, feeling the air charged with energy. Valora smiled serenely. Our child is about to teach everyone a lesson about the power of unity. The doors burst open, and the purifiers stormed in, weapons raised, only to freeze in place as the golden light touched them. Their leader, a tall humanoid with metallic skin, staggered back, his voice filled with shock. Impossible, he gasped. The prophecy, the celestial child. The light intensified, and Thomas shielded his eyes as a wave of energy pulsed outward from Valora, passing harmlessly through humans and Lumari but causing the purifier's weapons to disintegrate in their hands. In that moment, as enemies stood paralyzed by a power they couldn't comprehend, Thomas understood that the universe had just fundamentally changed, and humanity's place in it would never be the same again. 3 days after the purifier attack, representatives from 12 interstellar species gathered in Harmony Station's Grand Council chamber. The news of the hybrid child had spread across the galaxy, and what had begun as a diplomatic incident had transformed into an event of cosmic significance. Thomas stood at the viewport of his quarters, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. The reflection that stared back at him looked different somehow, older, perhaps, or simply changed by the enormity of recent events. In just over a month, he had gone from being Earth's chief negotiator to becoming the father of what many were now calling the bridge child. His door chimed softly. "Enter," he called, turning to find Admiral Harlow standing in the doorway, her own dress uniform adorned with commendations. "It's time, Commander," she said, her typically stern expression softened with something like respect. "They're all waiting." Thomas nodded. "How is she?" "High Envoy Valora is already in the medical chamber. The Lumarai healers say it will be soon." They walked in silence through corridors now repaired after the battle. The station hummed with an energy of anticipation that transcended species barriers. Even the Arcturians, traditionally stoic and reserved, showed signs of excitement. The medical chamber had been transformed. What once was a sterile examination room now shimmered with soft light and ceremonial decorations from both Earth and Lumarai traditions. In the center, resting on a platform that seemed to hover above the floor, lay Valora. Her entire body glowed with brilliant golden light, pulsating in waves that rippled outward through the air. Around her stood Lumarai elders, their hands extended, channeling their own energy to support her. Thomas moved to her side, taking her hand. Her skin felt warm, vibrating with power that tingled up his arm. "Thomas," she whispered, her eyes now pools of pure light. "Our child comes." Elder Torno gestured for Thomas to place his other hand on Valoris' abdomen, which now shone so brightly it was difficult to look at directly. "The father must complete the energy circuit," Torno explained. "Your human bioelectricity will help stabilize the birth process." Thomas did as instructed, and immediately felt a surge of connection unlike anything he had experienced before. It was as if his consciousness expanded, briefly touching the minds of everyone in the room, the Lumarai elders with their ancient wisdom, the human doctors with their analytical curiosity, and at the center, Valoris' serene presence and the bright, eager consciousness of their child. "I can feel it," he gasped. "I can feel our baby's thoughts." Valora smiled. "She greets you, Thomas Reeves of Earth. She has chosen her moment." The light surrounding Valora intensified, forcing everyone except Thomas to step back. He remained connected, somehow protected by the same energy that now filled the room. The light coalesced, forming a swirling vortex above Valoris' body, spinning faster and brighter until, with a final pulse, it condensed into a small form that hovered in the air between Thomas and Valora. Their daughter. She was beautiful beyond description, her skin shifting between human tones and luminescent patterns, her eyes dark like Thomas's but containing the same cosmic depth as Valoris. A soft corona of golden light surrounded her small body as she floated gently into Thomas's trembling hands. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The newborn looked up at him with impossible awareness, and he felt rather than heard her first communication, a sensation of recognition, of belonging, of love. Valoris' glow had dimmed to her normal levels as she sat up, reaching for their child. "She carries the essence of both our species, but she is something entirely new. The first of her kind." As the three of them connected, a gentle wave of light expanded outward from the child, passing through the walls of the medical chamber and throughout the station. Thomas later learned that everyone aboard Harmony Station experienced the same moment of universal connection, a brief glimpse of a consciousness that transcended species barriers and spoke directly to the shared essence of all life. 2 hours later, when Valora had recovered her strength, they entered the Grand Council chamber together. Thomas carried their daughter, now wrapped in a special garment that shimmed with intricate patterns representing both human and Lumarai heritage. The assembled delegates rose as they entered, a silence of awe falling over the chamber. At the center of the circular room stood a pedestal bathed in light. Admiral Harlow stepped forward. "Commander Reeves, High Envoy Valora, please present your daughter to the Galactic Assembly." Together, they placed their child on the pedestal. Rather than lying down, she hovered above it, her golden aura expanding to illuminate the entire chamber. The Arcturian Prime Speaker stepped forward first, bowing deeply. "We recognize this child as the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy, the one who would unite the divided stars. The Arcturian hegemony pledges protection and alliance to her and to both her parental species." One by one, representatives from each civilization approached, offering recognition and support. Even a communication from the Purifier homeworld arrived, announcing the overthrow of their extremist leadership and requesting forgiveness for their actions. When all had spoken, Thomas addressed the assembly. He had prepared a formal diplomatic speech, but looking at his daughter, at the miracle she represented, he set it aside. My daughter was created through an accidental touch between two species who had never met before, he said, his voice strong with emotion. If such a simple connection can create something so extraordinary, imagine what we might accomplish through intentional cooperation. Humanity is young in the galactic community, but today we offer our hand, quite literally, in friendship to all. A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the assembly, followed by the thunderous sound of applause from a dozen different species. Later, as Earth's representatives prepared for the formal naming ceremony, Admiral Harlow approached Thomas privately. The Security Council has voted unanimously. They're creating a new position, Interspecies Ambassador Plenipotentiary, and they want you to fill it. She smiled, an expression Thomas rarely saw on her face. Though I suspect your most important diplomatic role will be as a father. Thomas looked through the viewport where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space. Just weeks ago, his world had seemed so large, the center of human existence. Now he saw it as his daughter would, one beautiful world among countless others, part of a vast, interconnected cosmos. That evening, Thomas and Valora stood together in the observatory, their daughter cradled between them. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if welcoming their child to the universe she would help reshape. Have you decided on a name? Valora asked softly. Thomas nodded. If you agree, I'd like to call her Aurora. In Earth mythology, she was the goddess of the dawn. Valora's skin rippled with patterns of approval. Aurora, she repeated, the name musical in her voice. The dawn of a new age for both our peoples. As if in response, their daughter's aura pulsed with golden light, sending small sparkles of energy dancing around them like tiny stars. Thomas Reeves, once just a human diplomat, now father to the most important child in the galaxy, felt a certainty he had never known before. Whatever challenges awaited them, whatever wonders the universe held, they would face them together, a family unlike any that had existed before, but perhaps the first of many to come. Aurora, the bridge child, had changed everything with her very existence. And the universe would never be the same again.